Sijmen Ranitz, welcome to the DCQ podcast special sit. I'm very pleased to have you on today and grateful that we were able to sort things out. How are you?
I'm doing well. It was quite a pleasure to see you in London at the Insol conference. And for me, it was a great event because we had the past president's dinner as usual there, and I met a lot of old colleagues. So I'm doing well. Yeah,
Excellent.
fortunately, although I'm getting older.
Well, we'll get to that because, are you joining us from the Netherlands today, from The Hague, I assume?
I am in The Hague as we speak. I have an office in Amsterdam, Jhr, but I'm there only very little time. I normally am in The Hague. I've got a small office here in the house, and I am more or less retired. Not completely. I have got something like, I think, 4 or 5 supervisory board positions. I'm director in 2 or 3 foundations, one of which is dealing with the termination of the Slotervaart ziekenhuis, a case which is quite famous in the Netherlands, not outside the Netherlands, but a very complicated matter, where we have to deal with patients that claim money due to medical mistakes in the past. So it's still some work, but I'm reducing slowly.
Well, yeah, because it seems like, you have unlimited energy, because maybe, I've told you before, Sijmen, for me, you are the absolute OG of cross-border insolvency in the Netherlands for sure, beyond, as well with others. And you're also, for me, a big part of the answer to the question how I got into special sits space. And, when I started as your trainee in Rotterdam in July 1995 at the Dutch law firm, the Brauw Blackstone Westbroek, you already had almost 20 years of practice behind you. And if we fast forward from then to today, you've been in practice for over 50 years. And, that means that there's a lot we can cover today. And I hope, we can actually, make such, progress so that people can, see how much and how wide your experience is. And maybe we can start at the very beginning. Maybe you can, let us know how, when, and why did you, decide to pursue a career in law, and how did you then end up in the special sit space? Was that your decision, or were you just destined to do this?
That is an interesting question. I went to secondary school in The Hague, a school that's called a gymnasium, which is typically Dutch. And at that time, you were learning 6 languages and about 12 mathematics courses. So it was very difficult. It took some time for me to finish it. I never thought what I should do after school. But as my father was a medical doctor, I decided to study medicine. So I went to Leiden. I had inscribed myself for the medicine faculty. I went there for the first day. It was a day that everybody had to be there from that year, the year 71. And the unfortunate thing was...
The year I was born, so that shows you.
Yeah, shows the difference. But when I came in, I saw a lot of men and women, more men than women, by the way. But I thought this is not the type of person I like. These are not going to be my friends. So I went to the administration of the faculty. I said, cut me out. I'm not going to do medicine. I go to law school. So then I went to law school, inscribed myself for law school, and I went to law school.
And why law school, Sijmen? Because that's different from...
My brother was studying law, and he said it was an interesting study, and it wasn't too hard work. So that was quite okay. So then I went to law school. At that time, the law study was had two phases, two different phases. Phase one was going for your first diploma, and then you had another 2 years to finish the study to become a master in law. I did the first 2 years with my fingers in my nose. It was not that difficult. When I went to the university to pick up the paper, the kandidaats-documents, they were called at that time, there was a guy in front of me, and we started chatting because we had to wait, and it was quite nice weather. It was in June, and this guy told me that he had an accident by car in Wassenaar, and he lost 1 year of his study. So he was thinking to pick up for that year and do 1 year in the summer holiday of 73. I said, well, that's ambitious, but it's possible, I think. So we went to we got our paper, then we went to the faculty, and we said we want to do the examinations in September, which is in 3 months. And we want to do all the examinations for year number 3. And they said, well, that's fine, go ahead, and we'll see what happens. And we both managed. So then when the official start of year number 3, I finished already year number 3. And that gave me a reasonable position. They asked me to become assistant in the faculty, which is a paid job. You're a civil servant, you get money, and you build up your pension for later, which is great. So I accepted that function, and I had to educate some students that were in Leiden for the first year. So not that difficult. You had to do some examinations, not that difficult. So I was quite a happy guy, and I liked the law study. Then when I was almost ready, I realized 2 things. One, I didn't have a job yet, not a serious job. And 2, I had to finish my study in 4 years, which is the official term for law school in the Netherlands at that time. So I had about 2 or 3 months to go. So I started writing on the paper that you need to write for termination of your study. And then I met a Professor Bloembergen, who was then a very serious professor in Leiden. 2 years later, he went to the Supreme Court in the Netherlands. He was a good guy. But he came to me and said, Mr. Ranitz, do you have a job? And I said, sorry, Professor, I have no job yet. I have not tried. I have not done anything yet. But then he said, you take a pen and pencil and paper and you write down Blackstone, Rueb and van Boeschoten. That's the firm you are going to apply to for a job. And I said, sure, Professor. At that time, you know, the professor is always right. So I called Blackstone, Rueb and van Boeschoten, and they allowed me to come. And they offered me a traineeship for, at that time, 3 years. Every young lawyer had a traineeship of 3 years, stagiaire. And then it's up or out. At Blackstone, it was very strict, up or out. And I became a trainee at Blackstone, Rueb and van Boeschoten, which I liked very much. Now, you asked something about why did you went into the insolvency field.
That's right, because it's, you know, I assume that at that time in the 70s, the term special sits and special situations was nowhere, you know, known in the field. And
No.
and that bankruptcy was very much something that you know, it wasn't a reputable profession to do. And it wasn't sort of, you know, a specialization in itself.
You're quite right there. When I became a lawyer, a trainee at Blackstone, Rueb and van Boeschoten, as every other trainee in the area of the District Court of The Hague, and when you're very young, you get some bankruptcies. Those are very small enterprises or natural persons. There's no money involved. It's totally, it's dull. But the court, by accident, gave me a bankruptcy in Westland, which is the agricultural area near The Hague. And it appeared to be a company that was trading tomatoes. And it had cars, it had employees, it had a hell of a lot of tomatoes, and they were exporting to Germany. So I actually had to run a company for at least 6 weeks in order to get all the tomatoes into Germany and get money in. That was something that the court noticed. So the court then said to me, I think you're quite good in what you're doing, so maybe we give you more cases and more interesting cases. Well, I said, yes, please, do so. So I got some more cases, which I handled, and it was fun. Then something happened that I could not have foreseen, which is the supervisory judge. In the Netherlands, there is a special judge. In insolvencies, it's called the supervisory judge. The supervisory judge of the District Court of The Hague asked me to drop by. So I went to meet him, and he said, I think you like being a liquidator or a trustee, and I think you're good at it. But you're very young. You are 24, and it's probably better if you have a senior lawyer helping you. Are you willing to accept dual appointments, that you are appointed and that senior lawyer is appointed? And I said, well, if it's a nice guy, why shouldn't I? So it happened to be Mr. Blankenstein, a single lawyer, but he was the trustee and liquidator of The Hague. So immediately I met him. We were friends in a day, and we decided to work together. And that worked out quite well for me, because in my second year, the court appointed him and me in a difficult matter, the NBM, which is a company based in The Hague, building houses, roads and bridges all over the Netherlands, 32 subsidiaries, more than 3,500 employees, and they were in serious trouble. And the court said to me, well, see if you can save this company. Well, that was a good start of the day. So I went to that company and I asked to speak to the CEO. And the first thing that the secretary told me, said, please sit down, have a cup of coffee. He's very busy at the moment, but if you wait, you will have a slot with him. I said, okay, that's fine. So I waited for 10 minutes, court-appointed trustee, and then again, the secretary told me, it's another 10 or 15 minutes, he's still busy. I got another coffee, and then I thought, this is totally ridiculous. I'm sitting here doing nothing. So I just stood up, walked to the door, opened the door of the room of the CEO, and he was sitting there reading the newspaper. And then
you were appointed as trustee. So
I was appointed as the trustee.
You were
then
in
I
charge.
told him there were two options. Option one, he would leave the building right away, never get back, and we'll see how we finalize it. The second option is he doesn't leave the building. I leave the building. I go to the court, ask the court to take away the suspension of payment and declare the company bankrupt. And then I would dismiss him the same day. He called his lawyer of the Brauw at that time, senior employment lawyer, and that lawyer advised him, well, maybe the best thing to do is listen to Mr. Ranitz and leave the building, and we'll solve it later. Because if the company goes bust, you'll be kicked out, everybody will be kicked out, and it will be a disaster, and people will hold you liable. So then the guy left, good, and that was my first hour in this company. I spent basically a year, more than 4 days a week in that company. just to get it going, solve the issues that were coming up. And there were quite a number of issues. First of all, the company was listed in Amsterdam, which implies that if you need shareholder approval, you need to convene a shareholders meeting, which is not something easy, and you've got no authority, hardly. The second thing that makes things difficult is the banks that were involved was mainly ABN AMRO, some other banks too, but ABN AMRO parachuted a guy into this company as observer for the bank. And this guy just told me, Mr. Ranitz, whatever you do, this company must go bankrupt. And I said, well, leave that to me. That's not your job. I said, yes, that's my job. I'm acting for the bank. I want this company. We want this company bust. We see no future for this company. Well, this gave some lively discussions because I had a strong feeling, and Mr. Blankenstein, the other trustee too, that the company had a chance to survive. All we had to do is talk to quite a number of banks, including foreign banks, and see if we could, let's say, find a way out. Well, actually, what we did is we convened a shareholders meeting, and we asked authority to issue new shares. A huge number of shares. We got it. Then we told a few of the financial creditors, listen, you're a bank. I know you don't want shares, but if you take the shares, we've got one party that's willing to pay 4 guilders and 60 cents, I think, or 4 guilders and 55 cents per share and buy the shares. That is an option. So you've got a put option for those shares. They were quite happy. So a lot of banks said, yeah, that's a good idea. Swiss banks, French banks. So we came a long way, except for ABN AMRO, because ABN AMRO as main bank said, no, we don't want any composition, we don't want any shares, get going, get the company bankrupt, liquidate it and go. And then we asked the court, the supervisory judge, to convene a meeting with ABN AMRO and with people from a certain level. And he did. And he explained that he saw no reason for bankruptcy at that moment in time. And he said, well, we're not going to take a decision today, but you should consider to cooperate and get this company through the composition and keep it alive. This guy, the observer for the banks, kept on saying, well, no way, no way, no way. And now you see that you need some luck in life. I went to a drinks reception of the chairman of the advisory board of ABN AMRO, an important man living in Limburg. I had to go all the way to Limburg to just go to that reception.
Netherlands.
Yeah, the south of the Netherlands. And at that reception, I heard this man, the chairman of the advisory board of ABN AMRO, I heard this man saying, if something goes wrong in this matter, Mr. Kalf will not be the next president of the ABN. And then I thought, Mr. Kalf, he's in the board, but he's not president. And he wants to be the president, clearly. So I left the drinks reception. I called one of my partners and I asked that partner, do me a favor, write the writ, whatever you do, tell me it's illegal, it's fraudulent, blah, blah, blah. Write the writ, have it issued tomorrow by the writ server to the ABN, to Mr. Kalf in person. That happened. And within 24 hours, a guy from the bank called, what are you doing, Simon? You're killing the deal. You want a composition, and now you're sending a writ to our board member. What's happening? I said, well, you know what's happening. what you are doing is totally stupid, crazy. We'll find out why. We'll find the reasoning behind it, and then you'll hang. No. Let's sit down and talk quietly. And well, afterwards, the ABN agreed on the composition, accepted the shares, and everybody was happy. So that was a good. Actually, I was lucky because I got the information from this important person, the chairman of the advisory board, who of course that board can take decision who's going to be the next CEO. And then I realized something is happening, and I checked the books of the company, and then I realized what was happening. There was quite a lot of asset value in the company. We had 30 something subsidiaries, lots of assets, most of them pledged to the ABN AMRO. And the ABN AMRO had more contracting parties, clients. They were not that rich. They were not that full of assets. So for them, strategically, it was better to kill one company and get a lot of money in and keep the others alive than kill another company without any assets. So
they had a portfolio view on the situation, and you were obviously looking at one situation on its own.
Yeah. So I was lucky. Now there's also a downside. There's always a downside. I was almost all the time not in the office. I was at this company, and Mr. Blackstone, the boss, asked me to drop by and said to me, "Simon, we don't do bankruptcies. Bankruptcies are, it's something we don't do. And you are doing it. So if you want to stay on this firm, no more bankruptcies. And otherwise, leave. It's up or out. So if you don't go up, you go out." And I found that quite threatening because I really had fun in insolvency land. So I thought, what is a good thing to do? And then I realized I've been working 1 year in this insolvency, in this moratorium. I asked the court for an interim salary decision. So I went to the supervisory judge. I said, I will be judged by my firm in 2 months. It would be extremely helpful if you would give my salary decision in the next week so that I can transfer the money and pay myself, basically pay the firm. That was something like 480,000 guilders, which is a turnover that many partners didn't make. So I transferred that money to the company without any further comments, not saying salary for Simon, not this. I just transferred the money. And then bookkeeping sent a note to all the partners. Who is this money for? What is this money? And then I sent a note to all the partners. Oh, sorry, I forgot to I forgot. No, sorry, that's my salary. It's all yours. And that was probably something that did help get the right decision. They made me partner. They thought,
I mean, that is quite a lot of responsibility for a second or third year trainee in a law firm. Obviously, Blankenstein was there as well, but you had a lot of responsibility, and nobody in your own firm was actually looking after what you were doing. That was typical at that time, because how big was the firm at that point in time when you joined?
The firm was something like 12 partners, I think, 12 or 13 partners, and altogether maybe 25 lawyers. But I did have some assistance from 1 or 2 partners who were willing to, let's say, sit down and talk to me and with me. And if I had a question, they would give their view. And that was, generally speaking, helpful, because it made me more confident that I was on the right track.
Right.
if you're all alone doing everything, that's a bit tricky. And I had this colleague, this Mr. Blankenstein, my co-trustee, who was very old, very senior, lots of experience, and I could always call him, and then he would say, "No, I wouldn't do it this way. I would do it that way, and I would do it not now. I would do it next week." Or he was very practical in finding solutions. So it's not a one-man show. It's basically, I was lucky to have Mr. Blankenstein and to have at least 2 or 3 partners in the Brauw firm, in the Blackstone firm, that were willing to, let's say, answer my stupid questions and give guidance.
So the first two, insolvencies were already cross-border insolvencies and quite sizable. The first one with Germany and the tomatoes, and the other one, a group structure with various entities in it. So, and this was, mid-late 70s we're talking about.
Yeah, we're talking about 73, 74. No, sorry, that's not true. I started working at 76, so this must have been 78, 79.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And at that time, this was not a practice, as you say. It wasn't a practice that the firm Blackstone, Rueb, and Boeschoten was doing. But I guess you convinced them that it was worth their while letting you at least do it. So after, you made that early interim payment, were you allowed to progress with that practice? And were you the only one doing it? Or were you just, how was the firm organized? Was it organized per partner, or was there like a corporate group, a litigation group? How did it go about?
At that time, Peter, we didn't really have groups. We had a group of cassation. That was Supreme Court work. Yep. That was very clear group. Then we had partners who did M&A work, but also litigation. We had partners that did international work for international banks, but the same partner would probably also do a rental case or something small. So we didn't have a very strong structure. We were basically very independent. Each lawyer was very independent, but it worked out quite well, because later, when we started our discussion with the Brauw about the potential merger, I found out I was responsible for the money in the Blackstone firm. So when I talked to my counterpart in the Brauw, and I asked them, what's the full profit? What's the 100% partner? What's he making? That was a lot less than the partner of the Brauw, of the Blackstone. So the firm was financially very strong, because we didn't lose too much time internally talking, discussing things. Everybody was basically fighting for his client, fighting for the case he was running, and on average we did quite well.
And what were the main, clients of the firm? I mean, maybe just give some context, because the Blackstone firm is one of, I guess, 5 firms that, ultimately make up the Brauw Blackstone Westbroek, the firm that I joined in 1995, but only merged as, the Brauw Blackstone Westbroek in 1990. And Blackstone, merged earlier before you joined with Vegens. And I think the Brauw merged with Helbach. So 2 lawyer firms that were, at that point in time when you started, still independent. And Westbroek was, a firm of civil law notaries. And they merged first with the Brauw in the 80s. And then I guess, Blackstone and the Brauw were in The Hague, as I understand it. Yes. Fierce rivals on many cases. We was the Supreme Court.
We were desperately competitors. So basically, Blackstone on the one hand and the Brauw on the other hand we were basically opposite parties in many cases. But this is a funny story. At that time, in the 90s, very many law firms decided they needed to grow by merger. So we had talks with Loyens Loef, we had talks with Nauta, we had talks with everybody. Not on our initiative, but on their initiative. So I have been sitting on the corner in the Gracht where we had our office, endless with other law firms that were saying why we should merge. And well, I reported to the partners, well, this is an option, but I see this problem, that problem, that problem, that problem. And then one of the partners, who is now dead, but Mr. Wiersma, he played tennis once a week with a partner of the Brauw. And they had played their tennis on that evening, and they were talking about how's your firm going, how's our firm going. And then Wiersma suddenly said to this partner of the Brauw, it's so funny. We are talking to Loyens, to Loef, we are talking to Nauta, we are talking to blah, 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 blah. But we never talked at all about the merger. And this guy said, no, why don't we? Let's talk about the merger. So that evening, I got a phone call from Mr. Wiersma saying you should also think about a merger with the Brauw. For me, it was alien. But those discussions started. And it was a discussion basically done by a civil law notary from formerly Westbroek, Mr. Bart Ockens. And I was quite lucky to be in the negotiation team for Blackstone, for the financial area. And Mr. Ockens and I think we agreed more or less in 2 months on main issues without talking to the partners. Things like, where do we have an office? The Brauw said, let Blackstone come to our office. We are big enough. We can rent some more space, blah, 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 blah. And I said, no, you're not going to do that. Because then secretaries and also lawyers will say, we do this here, this way. Then they have an advanced position. And I don't want your people to come to my office, because then our secretaries will do the same. We create a new problem. And then we rented a building called the Rode Olifant.
The Red Elephant, yeah. Very, a
very nice building. And in the beginning, all partners, both the Brauw, both Blackstone, were against it. Because it was very prestigious. It was very luxury, blah, 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 blah. And then I said, well, let's just go there, walk around. There is an architect improving things. Let's just go there, walk there on a Saturday, and then Sunday think about it, and Monday we'll talk further. And everybody said, well, it is a nice building. Yeah, there are some very nice rooms. Yeah. And then they asked me what's it going to cost, because it was a rental. And then we were lucky again. The team that had to rent it out was stuck. They couldn't do anything else except rent it to us, because I had called all the accounting firms in the Netherlands saying, are you going to The Hague? No? Okay, great. Don't go to that building. If somebody said, we're going to The Hague, I said, don't even consider going to that building, because we won't be friends. So there was only one potential party that was going to rent it. We did. And the whole team that rented it out was sacked within 3 months by the supervisory board. So we had a cheap deal.
That's amazing, because so that's 1990, and obviously Rotterdam was the place for the civil law notaries. Westbroek, you had The Hague, and I guess there were some there was a venture in Amsterdam, but the beating heart of the Brauw Blackstone Westbroek was very much in The Hague. I remember, when I started, that the bloodstreams of, the Brauw, Blackstone, and Westbroek were still very noticeable. Who came from which, original firm. What were sort of, how would you describe the three main firms that made up the Brauw? Because the Brauw, obviously is now its own melting pot of those three, individual firms, but they were quite different. I mean, yours, the Blackstone, was quite different from the people from the Brauw.
Yeah, they were very different, but I think deep inside, everybody had the same feeling of, let's say, love for law, love for legal issues, love for performance. So there were only maybe 15 or 20 lawyers that did not fit in the joint venture.
Right.
The vast majority was quite happy. They would go to a new building. They could settle. They could recreate their own existence. So we were quite happy, and we never had the feeling that we did something wrong. And the revenues were also great. The atmosphere was great. The only thing that was a bit of a setback was at a certain stage, the merged firm, the Brauw Blackstone Westbroek, considered a merger with an English law firm. And we considered a merger with Linklaters. And there have been lengthy discussions, both in The Hague and in London. And I've been in London quite often, about would this work, would this go? And there we strongly felt, especially the Blackstonians, that there would be a cultural difference so big that we would not be able to cure that in, let's say, 5 years. It was so much money driven, Linklaters. Well, Blackstone was also money driven, but also quality driven. The quality of the work should be excellent. And we had a feeling that Linklaters was a little bit more inclined to say, if it's money, enough money coming in, it's okay.
Yeah. So that was part of, because the Brauw was, part of an alliance of European firms. There was also a Belgian firm. There was a firm from Italy, from Spain, from Germany, from Sweden, and they sort of, I obviously, remember that vividly. The Linklaters alliance. I guess possible merger, that's where we're heading, because obviously at that point in time, I was in London myself, and anticipating that the merger would go ahead. It didn't, and for us in London, that came as a surprise, and it has, had a huge impact on my career, because as you may recall, at that time, with the help of Frans Roosendaal, one of the civil law notaries, and yourself, the whole idea was for me to maybe go to China, and be there in the Beijing office, together with the Linklaters people in the Shanghai office, so that we had both places, because there were two licenses. And sort of for me, at that point in time, I had already started to study a little bit of Mandarin. I was already sort of, signed up for the local football team in Shanghai, looking for an apartment, and all of that obviously, changed dramatically afterwards. And and I actually in the end didn't go back to the Netherlands, but stayed there. But that was a time, Simon. I mean, the merger that we were just talking about between De Brauw and Blackstone Westbroek. Between Blackstone and De Brauw and Westbroek. There was, a wave of mergers in the Netherlands and on the continent. And I guess the logical next step was to be even bigger, because look now, there are absolute mammoth firms out there. And I guess, De Brauw was just part of that. But they decided to stay independent. And obviously with hindsight, it looks like that was definitely for them a good decision.
Well, maybe sometimes you don't know why things happened the way they happened. And I have been in many, many meetings with the Alliance of European Lawyers. And we also had Linklaters attending those meetings now and then. And I don't know whether you know the man, he's dead by now, but there was a law firm in Madrid, Uria.
Yeah,
And
Uria
Mr.
Menendez.
Uria was a very well-regarded person, very Spanish. I liked him very much. If he said something, you could rely on it. He never lied. He never denied something that he shouldn't deny. So I was really, I respected this man very much. I remember we had a meeting in Brussels where all those firms sent one or two people. And this time that meeting was chaired by somebody from Linklaters. And Mr. Uria was there too. And Mr. Uria asked the word. And the man said, no. The chairman said, no. And he continued talking, and then somebody else was talking. And Uria raised his hand again and said, no. At the end of the day, Mr. Uria raised his hand 5 times. And then at the 5th time, the chairman said, oh, come on, shut up, Uria, shut up. And Mr. Uria said, it was a pleasure to be here. It was a pleasure to meet everybody except you. And you will never, ever see me again. And the Alliance of European Lawyers just lost the firm. And he left.
Wow.
That was something that I took back to the Brauw firm, saying, are we sure we have got the same mentality? Are we sure we've got the same education? And are we on the right track? And at that time, and I hate to say this, we had something like 80 partners in the Brauw Blackstone Westbroek. Far too many. So I said, if we want to consider another merger, we should do 2 things. We should look for a firm that's more or less the same as we are, polite people, good quality. And the second is, we can never merge with 80 partners. So we should say goodbye to at least 20 partners. And that's exactly what happened. There was a committee. I was lucky to be in that committee that was allowed to talk to 20 partners and tell them, you're out. So we basically, in something like 3 or 4 months, expelled 20 partners. We did that on a very polite way, financially fine. We arranged, if possible, other positions. So not that much of trouble. Only one partner started the legal proceedings and lost. So it was good. But those were also things, if you look at how the legal world develops, you have to take care that you don't have too many partners, but enough. That you have got enough knowledge in-house, that you've got advanced people that are really good in IT, really good in computers, excellent in presentations. It's quite difficult. And although I'm convinced that there will be another big change in law firms now that artificial intelligence is coming our way, whether we
Yeah.
like it or not. You should take care, and you should really consider what's wise. How can I keep people happy? Because if people are not happy, they don't work that well.
So how, I mean, like maybe just 80s and 90s, there were, waves of mergers, primarily, I guess, in the Netherlands. And then sort of 90s, 2000s, we see, huge mergers internationally. The English law firms enter the
Yeah,
Netherlands. It becomes bigger and bigger. But obviously, fast forward with, I guess, your part in the Netherlands after the Brauw was also starting boutique firms, smaller firms that are specialized. Specialization comes in. I mean, you were just saying that at the start when you entered the firm in the 70s, it was almost like everybody had a general practice. You did everything and anything within reason. But you were almost the exception to that rule, because you got submerged immediately in, an insolvency that basically, occupied all your time. But I guess, insolvencies are special in a way, because they require you to, be involved in many areas of the law. It's just in a certain situation, financial distress. How did that sort of develop? Because in the end, the practice of insolvency, faillissementen, it became something that stands on its own 2 feet. It's not a part of corporate, it's not a part of litigation, it's not a part of finance, but it includes everything in it. How did that develop for you? Because, on day one, you almost had your own department with the 2 big cases that you had.
yeah. Well, to be quite honest, in the Blackstone firm, we had a number of very different partners. Rueb, others. We had very left-wing people, we had right-wing people, we had people specializing in labor law. We had a lot of different partners with different knowledge. So I could easily walk to any partner in the firm and say, listen, I've got an issue. I want to do this, but I don't know how to do it. Is this the right way to do it? Or should I do it this way? Or should I do it another way? What are the tax consequences of if I do this? Because sometimes there are tremendous tax consequences in insolvency. And that basically helped me very much. Not that I avoided everything. I remember one insolvency where the bank foreclosed on real estate, and the tax authority said, you received government money 3 years ago to buy this real estate, so now you have to repay us 60%. And I had to repay, which was
Okay.
out of money, of course, of the liquidation. But it was a surprise. It's a Supreme Court decision that is maybe 5 years ago overruled again. The court said we did this wrong. This Supreme Court decision whereby we ordered Mr. Ranitz to pay this was wrong.
Okay.
We now have a new view, which is great. I don't care anymore. But you all make mistakes. You won't walk through the jungle without any scratches on your hands or feet.
So what do you then need to to have an insolvency practice? You need, I guess, a full service firm behind it, so you can tap into the knowledge that you need if and when you require it in your insolvency setting.
I don't think so. I think the first thing I think is extremely important for anybody who wants to be a liquidator or trustee is to try to be friendly. Be friendly in principle to everybody. Don't scream and shout. Don't play hard. Just quietly take your decisions, quietly explain your decisions, and also know enough lawyers in, but also outside of your firm, who have got knowledge that you might need. For example, penal law is something that's alien to me.
Yes.
Not when I was a young lawyer, because I had to do cases in the district court in The Hague, supreme criminal cases. Every young lawyer had to do those at those days.
That was the piketdienst.
Yeah. For example, I once had a killer, a man who shot a nurse in the center of The Hague. He killed her completely, 6 shots. And the next day I met him in the police station in the piketdienst, because I was the one I defended him, actually.
Wow, a murder case for somebody. Oh, wow.
And the good thing was, all the money you made in piket cases you could keep yourself. That was good. But that's not important. No, I think you should avoid making enemies unnecessary. If I treat you friendly and I can explain why I do something, you won't be angry with me. Right. If I do something without explaining it to you, and suddenly you think, what is he doing? He's very unfriendly. Then you start to be unfriendly too. So be reasonable and solve the issues. And most issues can be solved.
It's obviously also, a very stressful situation you come in. I mean, financial distress is something that, has a huge impact on the humans that are involved, both the debtor and the creditors, especially involuntary creditors. And then you come in, if you are appointed, with huge authority. You don't know the situation, need to get up to speed very quickly. So I can see that if you, throw your weight around and are not sensible and sensitive to, I guess, the tension and the stress there is, you're not going to get a lot of cooperation, are you?
If you don't have cooperation, you have a very difficult job, because you need many people. You don't need everybody, but you need some people. And let me tell you my story about another mistake I made. I was once called by a man called Mr. Momata from London, and he was the managing director of the English Toshiku firm. Toshiku is Japanese. They were all over the world. They were in Germany, in the Netherlands, everywhere. And they were in a restructuring procedure in Japan. So there were 5 trustees in Japan. And this Mr. Momata asked me if I could help him. I said, no, I can't help you, but I can help the Toshiku firm. The first thing I said, well, maybe first you pay something like 10,000, so that I know that you're serious. He didn't pay 10,000, he paid 200,000. Oh, well, okay. There was enough money.
There was a serious problem.
Yeah. So I looked at the issue. Now, to make a long story short, the Toshiku firm, the trustees in Japan, in Tokyo, they asked me to find money in the world, money that has leaked away, and they couldn't find it in their books, but it was Toshiku money. So I went to Liechtenstein, Monaco. I went all over Europe to destinations that were a bit different. Mr. Momata was very helpful. And altogether, I think maybe I got something like 50 million out of various jurisdictions. And I transferred that money to a bank account in the Netherlands. And then the Dutch National Bank called me and said, Mr. de Ranitz, what is all this money doing here? Can you explain this to us? I said, I cannot explain this to you, but don't you worry, it all goes out again soon. It will all go away to other countries. So I had to divide that money. So I made rules.
Simon, so that company was only, insolvent in Japan. There wasn't anything going on in the Netherlands. So there was no recognition. It was just like, for all intents and purposes, that was just a operating company in the Netherlands. There was no insolvency. It was only in Japan.
Now, at that time, based on the Second World War, the Japanese insolvency law said it only operates inside Japanese territory. And it doesn't operate anywhere outside Japan. So you couldn't recognize it because the Japanese law at that time said you can't allow Japanese trustees or liquidators, you can't acknowledge them, you can nothing.
Okay.
That was based on the MacArthur theory after the Second World War. So I had a lot of money. There were more insolvencies, bankruptcy in Germany, judicial managers in Singapore. There was a lot going on. But I had to get rid of the money. So what I did was I made rules for a mediation. And it said Simon's mediation rules. And it started with, you are invited and you can take one lawyer from your home country and you can take one Japanese lawyer with you, and that's it. I don't want too many people. And the second thing is, if you come, you need authority from your court, your supervisory judge, or whoever needs to give authority to close the deal, because I'm going to propose you a composition. And another rule I put in the mediation requirements was everybody had to be at least the day before the start of the mediation in Tokyo in an extremely expensive restaurant where I would pay the dinner. Everybody is welcome for the dinner. Everybody is obliged to be at the dinner, including the lawyers, but nobody was allowed to speak about the case. They didn't speak about the case. They're all quite happy, and very nice evening, very good food, good drinks. Then the next day, the mediation started, very difficult mediation. I finalized it in a day and a half, because after the first day, I had everybody in breakout rooms, so nobody could exactly see what's happening in the other rooms or hear what was going to be said there. And I ended the first day by saying to the audience in one room, everybody was there, that I was very proud about the professionality, how professional people dealt with this matter. But we have to look at the warning of the underground in London. Mind the gap. There's still one party holding out. So we're not there. Okay. Almost there, but not there. And then everybody thought, fuck, I'm the one who's holding out. Everybody's in agreement. I'm holding out. The next day, in less than 4 hours, everybody was willing to sign. Now, wow. I'll tell you, I'll give you my mistake. There was nobody on behalf of the Singaporean judicial managers, which is liquidator. And I asked the Japanese trustees, is there a proxy, where is a document? And they said, no, Simon, we have got a proxy orally from the Singaporean judicial managers. So no issue, we can do this. So I agreed, okay, let's do it. Then the next day I went to Kyoto for a dinner with one of the trustees. He offered a dinner, fortunately. And after the dinner, he told me, well, the Japanese judicial managers have just said that we had no proxy. I said, had no proxy? You told me you had a proxy. Yeah, but they deny it now. So the next day I had to fly to Jakarta but over Singapore. So what I did, I changed the flight I went to Singapore overnight, and stayed in Singapore for one night and a day, and then went to Jakarta. And being in Singapore, I asked for a meeting with the judicial managers. And it was one of the weirdest meetings I ever had. For about an hour and a half, I was explaining what was happening. I was being extremely friendly. There were 3 Chinese people, 1 woman and 2 men, and they were saying nothing. They were saying totally nothing. And then I said suddenly, well, I'm a smoker. Allow me a 15 minutes break so that I can smoke outside the building, because you're not allowed to smoke inside the building. They said that was good. Then I went outside the building. I didn't go and smoke, but I called Philips in Amsterdam. And I said, you must have somebody who has expertise in Japan, in Tokyo, in Singapore. I need somebody with real local knowledge. Within 5 minutes, I had a guy on the phone with real local knowledge. And he said, Simon, you are so stupid. I said, tell me why. He said, do you remember how the Dutch were after the Second World War vis-a-vis the Germans? The Germans were hated. They were not trusted. The Germans were wrong people. Singaporeans and Japanese, Singaporeans is worse. Singaporeans never, never, never trust a Japanese. So you should not have trusted the Japanese, saying that you had a proxy. You made a mistake. I said, well,
Wow.
that's fine. That's good, but the documents was perfect. So I asked the judicial managers what documents they need in order to approve this deal. And then they came with a list. They had made it in advance, clearly, with a lot of documents, but none of these documents was relevant. It was the telephone book of Amsterdam, a guide from the restaurant, a lot of things. I sent that list to the Netherlands. They shipped the whole bunch to Singapore, and then the judicial manager said, we confirm the proxy. Yeah.
Wow.
So you have to take care.
Know your
take
history
care.
and know your history and know, I guess, the local sensitivities, which, obviously, very interesting, and a very interesting story that seems to sort of underscore what I've heard in, almost all of the conversations I've had so far, is that almost the essence of what we're trying to do in special sits, in, cross-border insolvency, is to, bring people to the table and to come up with a deal, a compromise, a plan. And the way to do that is also to have an awareness of who is at the table and where do they come from and how do they relate to each other. And you sort of, you make that point here very, very clearly. And your role was there. You were advisor to the company, the debtor, but you also, got the authority from the debtor and the stakeholders to mediate the situation on behalf of the debtor. And then, get because was this in order to get a plan that you can then approve in Japan and in the other jurisdictions, and those jurisdictions where there is no insolvency, this was just a contract.
The whole thing is, the trustees in Japan were so happy that, one, I had found the money, at least a lot of it. B, it would go to various jurisdictions where there would be creditors who were a bit angry about Toshoku. And 3, they just accepted maybe the authority that I had in their eyes. And when I finished everything on day 2, I remember that we all had to stand up and stand in a line. And I was in front of the line. I was the first person in the line. And then a door opened and there came somebody who must have been 85 or 90 years old. That was the oldest trustee. He was as good as dead. He came to me with his card. He gave his card to me with two hands, and I took it with two hands, and he said, "Sensei." And then I said, "Oh, thank you very much." Sensei means teacher. Since that day, still a few lawyers in Tokyo say sensei to me.
Wow. Wow. So that is an incredible cross-border situation. I remember, Simon, when I just started in Rotterdam. 6 months later, I was still way too young to get involved. In the Netherlands, the Fokker aircraft manufacturer went into, I think, first suspension of payment and then bankruptcy. And I was dealing with old cases, but not, senior enough to get involved in the new case that was, for a long time front and center of everything. Maybe, can you say something about that case? To me, that was sort of, a seminal case when I started, but where I unfortunately didn't get involved because, I just started.
It's a bit of a story. I have to start with another case. There was another listed company in the Netherlands, and that company came into financial trouble. And Rothschild and some other banks made a group in order to solve the issue. And there was one bank, a French bank, Crédit Agricole, that was not involved in those discussions. And they called me and said, "Simon, we know they are having a discussions already for weeks. We are not involved, and that parent company owes us more than 25 million. I said, "Well, if the financial situation is very bad, we have to think how we can convince that company to pay. So allow me to do a few weird things." So the first thing I did was I went to the District Court of Amsterdam and I asked permission to attach all the shares of the subsidiaries of that company. It was a listed company, but subsidiaries were not listed. They were held, shares were held by that company. I called two writ servers and I said, "Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock at my office, we will be at the office of the debtor at 8:30. And I asked the CFO to be there for a discussion. And the CFO, although too late, he came. There came a lot of lawyers saying, "Hey, Simon, are you in this restructuring too? Are you, who are you representing?" I said, No. I'm not here to represent anybody in a restructuring because you left somebody out. And who's left out? There's no reason to stand still. So I'm here to hit. I agreed with them, with the CEO and the CFO, sign this document that you will not sell any subsidiary, nor pledge any shares, or I'll attach the shares all right now. There are two writ servers, they can do it in 10 minutes. If you do that, I will not attach the shares, and the banks, this group of lenders, who pays, just, I don't care, should pay me the 25 million that my client has claimed. ABN AMRO, at the end of the day, said I was an unfriendly lawyer, but they paid 25 million and they only deducted 500,000 for costs. And I later on called ABN AMRO, said, "That's a nice profit for you, 500,000 for doing nothing because you've got the money anyway." But my client was quite happy by receiving 24.5 million. Now, having that in mind,
and Simon, this is we're talking about the 90s here, right?
Yeah. Now, if you look
This
at,
is prior to the Fokker situation.
yeah, this was prior to the Fokker and prior to the situation that I also briefly discussed with you, Ahold, Albert Heijn, which is a company that almost went bust, but we saved it. All I wanted to say is you have to look at a case and always think, what do I not know? What could go wrong? If this French bank had been asked to join in the beginning, they would have joined. They would not have got 24.5 million. They would have got nothing or a little bit. But they simply ignored them. If you ignore somebody, you offend somebody. You should not, whatever you do, don't offend people. So when I went to the Fokker case, basically we acted for the company. That was a disaster. The shareholder was Daimler-Benz, basically Mercedes-Benz, Daimler-Benz, and the Germans most likely would not put in much money, and a lot of money was needed. I had a discussion with the Minister of Economic Affairs in the Netherlands, the Zuidhoutse Weg. And I asked him, why don't you, as government, don't start with 100 million? Because if you give 100 million, then banks will probably each give 50 and 50 and 100 and 100, and then I can pay you back the 100 million after a week. But I need somebody to be the first one to put money in. And he said, quite interesting, he said, Simon, I can't, because the second chamber will not allow it, and they will kill me if I do it. So politically, it's impossible. So those are the things you have to realize, that at the end of the day, although Fokker should have been saved, I'm quite optimistic there, we couldn't manage because we couldn't get the noses in the same direction. There was politics involved, there were different banks involved. Some banks had to explain to their shareholders or other parties of interest why they would do it or not do it. So at the end of the day, the company went bust.
And do you think, Simon, that if this had taken place like 20 years later, with, I guess, where we are in, cross-border insolvency, tools in the toolkit, mentality in, I guess, the Western European jurisdictions, the US and the UK, would it be a different story? Or do you think actually, politics is politics? It could have gone this way 20 years later as well. It is completely unpredictable.
Well, I don't know clearly, but maybe there would have been a bigger chance to save that company, because there were so many positive elements in the company. For example, if you look at the course of the guilder, the euro, and the dollar, many of these aircraft are sold for dollars. But also a lot of its parts are bought in dollars. Now that's a huge difference in your balance sheet and your profit and loss account. There was a lot possible, but people were so busy with protecting their own limited interests that we couldn't keep the company alive.
Nobody had a broader view, and the broader view was required here.
Yeah. Well, the good thing is, we had a last discussion with one of the ministers on an evening in a hotel, because when this case started, I went to a hotel called de Jachthut in Nieuwerkerk aan de Amstel.
The hunting cabin.
Yeah, and I went to the desk and I said, I want to know, do you have rooms available? They said, yes, we have rooms available. Do you also have an apartment? Yeah, we've got 2 apartments. I said, I want 4 rooms and 2 apartments, and I want them for an indefinite period of time. And she said, well, hold on. I'll ask the boss what's happening. The boss came. I said, this is what I want. I'm not going to allow you to give anybody any information on who is staying in those rooms. I take the responsibility for payment. But I'm not here officially. If somebody calls you and says, is Mr. Ranitz there? Who? Mr. Don't know that man. We are totally unknown. Basically, when we had the moratorium started, I had 3 administrators and they could not go home. And I could not go home too. So we needed a hotel to quietly eat and talk through the night what we would do the next day. That was very efficient, but I have to take care. And that owner never told anybody that we were there. It was very good.
So those are all the things that you don't learn in law school about, the practice. I mean, did you have any, courses on bankruptcy in law school at all? Or was it, something you only learned in practice?
It is very useful, I think, if you can, as a young lawyer, work with a senior lawyer who has experience in insolvency or moratorium restructuring, to see the many things you have to look at, and there are so many things that you don't realize. I think we already are 1 hour and 15 minutes, so I'll tell you one more story, which I think is of interest. Is the Ahold affair.
Right.
Ahold,
so that was early 2000s. I seem to recall. Right.
Ahold was and is the holding company of Albert Heijn, Gal, a major company listed both Amsterdam and New York. And I was called on a Sunday morning with the question to come to Zaandam because there was an issue. Well, so I took the motorbike. I drove to Zaandam. I chatted with a few people, and I called my wife and said, I come home on the motorbike, please. I take the car, pack my luggage, suits, ties, shirts, and you won't see me for the next 3 or 4 weeks because I will stay and sleep in Zaandam, which I did. I then realized how vulnerable this company was, because the threat I had in this other listed company, I attached to subsidiaries. Albert Heijn had a lot of subsidiaries, and Ahold was the ultimate owner and debtor. And if somebody would attach those shares of those subsidiaries, the whole any restructuring would fail. But how can you avoid that? So I was thinking, how can I avoid? How can I attach those shares? You can if you have permission of a judge in the Netherlands. But every judge, district court judge, can do that. And normally you go to the president or the voorzieningenrechter for this issue. But I can't go to all these courts. I don't have the time to explain it. So I decided to go to Haarlem, which is the court in which district Zaandam is. And I called the court and I said I would like to talk to the president in person as soon as possible, preferably today. Well, if you can be here in an hour and a half, we've got half an hour. Okay, I'll be there an hour and a half. I was received in a beautiful room in the court, and I explained this president exactly what the situation was. And I said, I can't avoid this. I can't manage this. The only one who can manage this is you. If you would be willing to call your colleagues in the Netherlands, the presidents, explain the situation and just ask them not to grant permission to attachments unless I am hurt, had the opportunity to defend the company, it would be great. I would love you. You don't have to say yes or no. Don't say anything to me. I don't want to know. I go again. Thank you very much for your time. Nobody attached the shares. Nobody.
But were there attempts made and you were hurt?
No, I don't know. Nobody attached the shares. And so any attachment would have triggered a lot of conditions. President would make. It would be a disaster of bonds that would be due and payable. So lucky. And maybe the president did call. I don't know. I never asked him. Let it rest in peace.
So what? Because those are all situations, way before all the restructuring tools were in the toolbox, that demonstrate that you can restructure, complicated structures outside of court using, I guess, maybe insufficient tools compared to what we have now, but it does work. How have you seen, I guess, our profession, the special sits space develop, and how did that come about? Why was all of a sudden this specialty that previously, as Blackstone told you, we won't have anything to do with bankruptcies. We don't do that. It's dirty and, go away. All of a sudden, fast forward to today, I think a lot of people are interested in the space. It is taught in universities, in law school, and there are separate departments in many, many firms that only focus on this. What has happened?
I think that people realize that you need more or less special knowledge and a very good intuition. And knowledge is something you can learn. Intuition is something that somebody can maybe make you aware of in order to be able to solve such a complicated situation, because it's always very complicated. If you have a small bankruptcy, it's easy. You sell the table and the chairs and blah, blah, blah. It's easy. But if you've got a complicated company with, let's say, 4 or 5 jurisdictions involved, if you need to talk to different judges, you really have to focus on almost every aspect of that group. And then it is, of course, easier if you can do that with a group of special people, a group of 5 or 6 people who are familiar with the topics that pop up. Because many topics pop up only once or twice. They don't come every time. Attachment on shares of subsidiaries is something alien to many people.
Yeah.
But it is important. No attachment on shares is very important. Whatever triggers bonds to come due and payable is important. You have to look at that, and you can't do that yourself. When I was, for example, doing Ahold together with Peter Wacky, who's an excellent guy in difficult situations. We had
a corporate lawyer who actually, worked inside. He was pilot into the board and sort of, worked not as a counsel outside, but inside the company, right?
Yeah, later, but in the beginning not. In the beginning he was just outside counsel together with me, and he did the American. Well, he did specifically the American part. I did specifically the more Dutch part. But he has a very strong intuition. That's important, and knows what might happen and how you can avoid it. If you look at the SEC rules in the US for the US listing, if you as a company should be aware that you cannot pay your debts as they fall due, you should report that to the stock exchange. That would kill you in Amsterdam. If you report to the, you're gone. There are many little issues that you need intuition, and you need to be also brave by saying to the client, don't do it. Maybe it's a legal obligation, don't do it. Forget it. You won't make it. And also, let's say, realized how idiot people can be. In the Netherlands, we have the prosecutors, het Openbaar Ministerie.
Yeah.
The prosecutor
Public
always like
prosecutors.
to investigate difficult things. And I was called, I think, on a Friday by some officer from the fraud desk. And they said, it's good that you know, Mr. Ranitz, that we intend to come tomorrow with about 25 cars. We've informed the press that we will do this. We'll do a house search in Zaandam, and we will take all the documents that we think are necessary for a possible fraud. I said, well, one, you're idiot. You're total idiot. We already had for the SEC, the SEC already obliged us not to move any piece of paper without making notes. So I only asked them whether we should also do that with the toilet paper or if it's really all paper. So we didn't move anything. We're not going to move anything. We have an interest as a company to stay complete. So don't do this. If you do this, you trigger the bankruptcy. That's no problem. We'll sue you for more than 10 billion guilders. Now have a nice day.
Yep.
He later on called they, for the time being, wouldn't do it. But these are all the things.
But Simon, so if you then, what are the characteristics of somebody that will do well in the special slit space? The examples you've given, there are obviously legal skills involved, but as you say, there's a lot non-legal skills and a certain type of personality required to do well.
I think you need the legal skills, but you have to know what's important and how things work. I think it's very important to listen. I prefer to listen 2 hours than talk 2 minutes, because I need the information, and people are very often willing to share information as long as they have the impression that you listen and you don't judge. You don't say, hey, that's stupid. No, tell me. And if you can, if there's something minor and there's no use going into detail, forgive it. Let it go. If somebody has stolen the bike in a $20 billion company, I don't care. I'm not going to spend time on this. So it's important to realize, how can you bring this company back to life? And if you can't, how can you liquidate it properly? And those are the issues.
Yeah.
And then maybe who do you trust and who you don't trust? That's probably the most difficult. Yeah, that's the most difficult issue in my life. I normally trust people. And sometimes you can't trust people. And that's very unpleasant. But it happens. So then you should be aware that if you start getting a feeling maybe somebody is not honest, try how you can check. Try if you can find out what's happening. Because intuition is not always bad.
And how do you acquire that? Is it because, you're always somebody who is interested not just only in your own country, but abroad? You travel, you talk with people, you learn about history, about sort of culture. Is that sort of mandatory for this space?
It is an advantage if you have the opportunity to meet people from other jurisdictions, other countries. I had the tremendous pleasure of working for the IMF during the Euro crisis. And I worked from the Netherlands, but I went to many nice places like Latvia, Iceland, Spain, Italy, Greece, many places, to discuss with government officials and ministers how they could solve the issues and what they should write to the funds if they want money. you learn a lot from how people experience things, how people feel things, and that's a huge difference. There's one Europe, but there are very many different countries in Europe with different populations, with different ideas, and the same is everywhere in the world.
So maybe, like, put it in context, this was 2007, 2008. Well, this was 2008 when the financial crisis hit. The IMF, wanted you to sort of help them out. In Europe, we had huge problems with financial institutions in all the countries that you have sort of listed. At that point in time, you were just, at the end of sort of your tenure at the Brauw, and subsequently you started a boutique new firm with some others that today is also a force in the Netherlands in the space, alongside the Brauw, who obviously are still there. I'm talking about Razor, of course. Can you sort of explain how that transition went? Because doing this for the IMF is like a full-time job, especially when there's a crisis going on, the extent of the financial crisis in 2008.
It depends a bit. I was on my way out of the Brauw when the fund called. I just had 1 year to go. So I said to the Brauw, well, I'll be in the office now and then, but mainly not. I'll be somewhere else. Have a nice day. And that's not a problem. It's important to, if you can work in international organizations, it's a useful thing. You get experience, you see how people think, work. I, for example, worked in Indonesia for the for the World Bank, and when Indonesia was having a crisis, and that was absolutely challenging. It was quite special to come to a country where the whole economy was in trouble, and very many people didn't know where to start. So I asked from a big insurance company. There were about 50 creditors in a room. I said, why don't you make a creditors committee? And they said, what is a creditors committee? You can't sit on the table. Not everybody can speak at the table. If we all start speaking, then we won't get anywhere. So you need 3 or 4 guys. Trust those guys. Let them do it and let them do the job. The results are better, generally speaking. So that was very useful. I also went for the World Bank to Egypt, talking about the new insolvency law. And then you realize that their law and their whole legal system is based on the French law and the French system, which I didn't know. And then you have to look what are the problems in France and what are the problems in Egypt, and how can you avoid those? It's interesting.
Yeah, but it's a different level, right? Because you were sort of explaining the matters you got involved in. You have a client, and you sort of need to, I guess, get the best result for the client, but also very much come to a solution for the problems that are there, the financial distress problems. If you're going to a country where the banks are about to collapse, where there are, an excessive amount of non-performing loans, where, the banks are too big to fail, but there's no infrastructure, and the IMF, is asked to, maybe fund or come up with a solution. You're talking at a different level. There's there's not like one client, it's a whole country. How does that change things?
Well, there are many, many differences. The main difference is, and I shouldn't say this, but I say it anyway, is it learned me to mistrust governments in what they say. what they say is not what they mean. Very often they say something, but it's not what they mean, and it's very difficult to work if you can't trust those people. That's the reason why if the IMF gives money, there are endless conditionalities, conditions prior, and that are all written down and all negotiated, and they have to do it, and they check it. So there is a strong position for the fund. The World Bank is more friendly, generally speaking, but still they also have a certain interest in getting the money back, or at least see that it's not wasted. But it's different.
So again, it goes back to, I guess, the humans involved, right? The government, the politics, whether or not you can actually trust the word they say. The same thing with the stakeholders around the table. They represent the bank, they represent, trade creditors, the regulator, whatever it is. It's the individuals that you need to deal with, and whether or not you can come to a deal in large part depends on whether or not you can trust the people you're dealing with. And if you can't, it's going to be very difficult.
And sometimes there is a way that you can, let's say, check whether you can trust somebody, or you can avoid that person gets too much power. I was once called by a logistic company called Vos Logistics in Os. And the big boss, who had a lovely car, a very nice person, that he was the boss. And with the boss, I mean the boss. And then it comes whole very long time, nothing, and he's running everything. He managed to lend an excessive amount of money from an excessive number of banks. 10 million here, 15 million there, 20 million there, but altogether an amount that was not supportable by the company. So this man hired me and as a managing director. So I went there, and I think I worked there a year. Every couple of weeks, we had to do a tremendous lot of things. But now this managing director thought he was the client. So he said, Simon, I don't want you to do this, I want you to do that, I don't want you to do this. I said, that's fine that you don't want it, but you're not my client. The company is my client. And you're not longer the company, you are a different party of interest. He went to the board of the Brauw and said, what is this Simon doing? He is he's ridiculous, he's nuts, he's crazy, he's not assisting me. And I said, no, I'm not assisting you. I think I know a lawyer who can assist you, but I can't, because I have to save this company. That's my first thing to do. And we're not going to play around. It took a year altogether, and the unions had to be involved. But still, I'm quite happy. If I go on the road today, I see trucks from Vos Logistics. They survived. The debt was reduced about 85%. So the banks had to take a hit, but better that than bankruptcy. And the company is still alive and doing well.
And I guess your this case shows that, and it's probably something that is a lot more prominent than maybe people in London or New York recognize. A lot of businesses are family businesses, right? So again, the dynamic that you're now describing is very prominent in a lot of companies, where it's the baby of the owner. But when it goes into financial distress, you need to separate the business from the person. And sometimes, the family involved, the persons in the family may be the problem. And it's sensitive to deal with because it's family.
It is, but it's sometimes necessary. And I'm quite clear in that. No, you can't keep you can't help individuals too many and save the company at the same time. Sometimes you have to take decisions that are not pleasant, but are necessary if you are really convinced that that is necessary to save the company. And today, everybody is better off. If I look at the profession, I think it's a very interesting development. The lawyers are getting more and more important for big companies. Artificial intelligence can take away a lot of work from us. Let's say, write a deed of pledge, write a rental agreement. If you use Perplexity or any other, it comes out and it's almost perfect. But if it comes to more difficult problems, your artificial intelligence won't help you. And if I look at the hourly rates of lawyers when I was young, they were low, and they increased, and they increased, and they increased, and they still increase, and they increased. Now there are lawyers in the US that charge roughly $10,000 per hour. I don't think that's very sound, but I think specifically if it's in the area of liquidation, up or down of the company, basically people are priceless. They are willing to pay if it gives the opportunity, at least, to look if it can be saved.
Yeah.
So there will be a discrepancy. There will be lawyers making not that much money, and there will be lawyers making too much money. I think lawyers are, generally speaking, in the big firms, overpaid. You study not that long. A doctor studies much longer and makes less money. That's a bit strange, isn't it? And I think we should be well paid, and we are well paid. But there will be tensions. There will be tensions.
And do you think that the whole model of leverage, which is the model that law firms, apply, is gonna basically stop and need to be reinvented because of AI and the?
It won't stop. It won't stop because the thing is, young lawyers need to be trained. If you need also future partners. But there will be a much lesser number of younger lawyers in big law firms than there is today. And if I look at some big law firms in the Netherlands, I won't give you names, but they tell me that they are reducing the number of young lawyers that they hire because they use more artificial intelligence, and they only want the best lawyers so that they are future partners. It's partner material. And that's the difference. And partner material is important because specifically in insolvency, you need to be able to look at the problem from almost every side, upside, downside, left, right, in order to see where the risks are, what is urgent, what is not urgent. It's not always easy.
It isn't, but again, you're not trained for that in law school. And as you said, you almost need to have an apprenticeship or the opportunity to shadow somebody who's done it before so you can learn on the job. But learning on the job, that is leverage to a certain extent. And that is going to be under pressure if the hourly rates of the lawyers are as high as you say, because clients will not want to pay for it anymore. So how do you resolve that conundrum?
That depends a bit on the jurisdiction. For example, I know that in the Netherlands, it's the court that decides how much the lawyer makes. And if a lawyer that has 12 years experience, a serious lawyer, get now €400 net per hour. If you are a lawyer in the eastern part of the Netherlands or the northern part in Groningen, in a small village, and you do a liquidation and you get €400 an hour, you're rich. You're really rich. You don't have much overhead. If you do the same in London, you're poor. because
Yeah.
it's more expensive. So it's so different. It's so depending. But if you can negotiate your own fee, I think the fees will continue to go up.
Wow. So yeah, because obviously that's what you have explained in a lot of situations. You were not appointed the bankruptcy trustee or the liquidator. You were very much the advisor of the company, and then obviously the court is not going to appoint. Is not going to have a say in what you charge. That's
No.
something between you and the company.
Yeah.
And
Or
Simon,
maybe me and the big creditors, big banks, for example.
Yeah.
Sometimes
the stakeholders in
big
the
stakeholders.
situation.
Yeah, if you are if you have 100 million loan in a company and four banks have 100 million loan, and there is an issue, and they need you to solve it. I say, okay, I'll solve it, but let's talk 2 minutes about my rate.
Yes, well, and that's that for a long time that's sort of a difficult topic to raise, but it needs to be raised and it needs to be sorted. But
Yeah.
before I let you go, two questions I have, brief. One is, you've explained a lot of situations where it was very clear that special sits is not a 9 to 5 job. It's sort of, it can be 24/7 if you're in the middle of it. How do you, deal with a profession like that and still have a life? Because I know that, outside of life, professional life, you're a sailor, you're a pilot, you have other ambitions, but, the work is quite full on, as you explained. How do you make it all work?
That's very easy. The Brauw firm has always been friendly to me. Sometimes they hated me, but they were still friendly. If I work, let's say, in a matter and I work for 6 weeks and I actually stay in the company or stay in a hotel next to the company, I can't do anything else than work on that file. Basically, I'm devastated after 6 weeks. And then I say, the next 4 weeks, nothing. I go and sail, go on holiday, I go and relax on the beach, because I worked my fair share, and in very very long days, and that's also something that medical people can tell you. If you work very hard, very long days, you still have to do something on fitness to stay a little bit in condition, but then you also need time to really relax. And that's important. So I always had enough time to do funny things,
Yeah,
hobbies.
but yeah, and obviously, family life, you need to have a good arrangement with your better half and the family, because yeah, they need to understand why it is that for large periods of time you're sort of disappear and then come back.
It's critical that you can't do insolvency and big cases if you don't have a good relationship with your wife. For example, Ahold, I was away, I think, for 3 or 4 weeks. Fokker, I was staying in a hotel for a couple of months. Then you're not home. You're not at home for dinner. You're not cutting the meat. You're not there to pour the milk for breakfast. You are
No,
basically working. And then if you work very hard, it's also sometimes difficult to pay enough attention to your relationship. So you really have to take some time afterwards and build up again.
okay.
That,
Well, last question, for those people who listen and who, are excited to maybe have a career in special sits, what would be your advice to them?
it's a great job. Try to find somebody who has got a reputation to do it well. And even if you don't get paid, maybe go for a week or a couple of days with that person and see how he addresses issues, and talk to people that are doing that profession. That's why I think organizations like Install Europe, Install International, professional organizations that are international are very important, because there you can chat with people. How did you do this? How did you do that? How does this work in your country? Exchange your views, and don't be afraid. If I would be worried about every time people held me liable for something, if somebody would give me €1 every time I received a letter or an email, I hold you liable, blah, 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 I would be rich. I've had enough, and I've thrown them away because it is all nonsense. It's all barking. Okay.
Simon, I really appreciate the time you have. I know, it's, we can easily have more stories for much longer, but you've been very generous with your time. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.